Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We are going to be discussing some security essentials and staying secure today. We're going to be going over some security threats that are out there, and then moving on to password security and services such as MFA and how you can stay secure using that. My name is Martin. I am the Technical Support Manager here at SMS, and let's start with discussing about the company. So SMS is a gold partner, Microsoft Gold partner that is specialising in providing managed services for the mid-market and SME sector. We have been established for well over 15 years now with a portfolio of over 4,500 clients, and this is continuing to grow. We are ISO 9001, 27701 certified, and we do provide 24/7 support for all our services, and that's 365 days of the year. All the staff we have are UK based, and we are ideally placed in the industry to offer the best IT advice your business needs to be successful. And finally, we are here to help to get you the most out of services such as Microsoft 365, Azure, and Modern Workplace. So we're going to discuss some threats now that are available. I mean, or rather than available, they're actually out there. And one of the names that comes up a lot is a thing called social engineering. So for those of you that are unsure, or you may not have heard of what social engineering is, this is just basically the art of manipulating or influencing someone basically in order to gain control over their computer system. And this can be through many ways, such as deceiving a user to hand over access to their machine, basically to get your personal data. So this can be done through many ways. Majority of people have had all of these. So basically this is through like either a phone call, whether it's an email. You even do get some solicited mail via postal mail still, or direct contact to gain that illegal access. So some of the examples of social engineering are phishing, spearfishing, and whaling, and we're going to be discussing them now. So email phishing is the most well-known one. This is the one that's been around the longest. It's been around for quite some time, and this is basically where a malicious actor will send an email to a user impersonating things such as a known brand, and it'll use social engineering tactics to lead that person to either click a link or download a file. Now, a malicious actor can be either an individual or a group of people that are actually plotting this phishing attack against you. So it's not only just one person; it can be a mass of people that's doing that. Now, these links that you will traditionally get via email do contain, and they have contained, malicious websites that are designed to steal your personal data, such as credentials, passwords, anything that's personal to you. And it does it by installing, and it can also do it by installing malicious code. Now, this is known as malware or a virus, as some people. Malware is obviously a virus is a type of malware on the user's device to actually gain that control. So they'll basically install an exploit to target a specific area of your machine in order to gain that data that they're after. So once they have this data, by the way, it is then depending on who's doing it. It could end up on things like the dark web, or it could end up on and it'll literally go into an auction, typically when they have a mass amount of data, and it's whoever the highest bidder is will buy that data, and then they'll use that data to target that person or steal their identity, things like that. It can also be used for things such as the person that's actually doing the attack are doing it for their own personal gain. So they could actually be exploiting you for a specific reason, or let's say it has happened where it's been sold to the highest bidder, and then before you know it, your personal details such as passwords are available on the internet, and you can actually access them if you knew what you were doing. So basically, how can you identify an email phishing attempt? Well, you need to be mindful and look out for legit information. So look out for contact information or other illicit information about the organization being spoofed. Then look to identify things like misspelling in the email. The grammar is usually terrible normally. They are getting a bit more sophisticated now, and they are looking genuine, basically. Or it can be look at the sender's email address, or even the web address that's in there. You usually can tell if it doesn't look quite right. Say it's coming from your bank. Generally your banks will only ever email you market information about products. They'll never normally email you about logging into your banking account to update your details, for example. You need to look out for malicious and benign code. So this is basically just being wary of anything that includes code that tries to trick Exchange Online protection, such as downloads or links that have misspellings. So basically, Exchange Online protection is specifically on Office 365, and this basically is the engine that really runs the scanning of emails for things like viruses and spam. Now, you can actually write specific exploits that will actually get around this system, that will basically bypass it, and that's what they're designed to do. Because obviously no one can say that every spam engine is 100%. There's always going to be a 1% chance that it could get bypassed. So basically, you just got to be wary of it. I mean, generally, most of the time, things like these spam engines and these antivirus engines, they will block pretty much everything you get through, but there's always going to be something that comes through. Generally, it's not the one email that comes through that's the problem. So you just got to be very, very wary of that, because it can bypass that filter. Anything with fake logos or branding, that's usually a sign of something really that's not legit, because they can use things like malicious HTML attributes inside the email, where it'll basically try and redirect you somewhere, or it'll try and do something to your machine or something like that. If you get something that's got little text, it's only got things like images on it, be very, very careful, because with inside an image, some image such as an SVG image, you can actually write code inside that will actually execute an exploit on someone's machine. So you can basically have an SVG file, you can download that image potentially, and it can actually run something in the background without your knowledge. So just be very, very careful about if it's only got images on it and stuff like that doesn't look quite right. This is the reason why a lot of mail clients, such as Outlook, does have an option that will allow you to not download any images. So by default, it's set to not download anything. And then you have to actually manually turn that on, but you can actually do it so it's off permanently. And then when an email comes in, if it's someone that you know, you can actually, there's an option that says, do you want to download the images in this mail? So you can just click yes, and it'll literally just download. I say email phishing is one of the main ones, and you just got to be very, 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 very wary of it. That's all. So another type of phishing that's out there is one called spearfishing. So this is yet again another social engineering attack. So where basically the perpetrator will disguise as a trusted individual. So what it does, it tricks a specific individual or group of people within an organization, typically, into clicking on a link in a spoofed mail, text message, or instant message. Now, I actually had one of these. I had a text message that was a spearfishing attempt last week, from pretending to be, it was from the NHS, and saying that I'd become in contact with COVID, and it was actually it was flagged on my device as being potentially a dodgy text, basically. And the actual link, when I actually look at the link, it was actually an organization based in China, trying to acquire my data and their financial details in order to pay for me to have a COVID test. So so that's the sort of thing that can happen. Now, you've got to be very, very, very careful with spearfishing. So really look out for abnormal requests. I mean, if you're getting a request internally, for example, that comes from people in other departments that you've never spoke to before, don't even know who they are, which does happen in larger companies, and it does seem out of the ordinary, just validate it first. Just basically double check that with, say, your manager, or with someone or just with someone, just to sort of get clarification. Why are they trying to request this information from me? Because I've never spoke to them before, and it's not part of my job function. So I'm a bit wary of that. Also, look out for shared drive links. A lot more people are sharing things on things like Google 365 and Dropbox and many other sharing sites. Just be very, very careful, because these can redirect to fake websites that contain viruses, and if you've not got the adequate security software on your machine that will flag this, it could potentially download something locally, and if it's like a Trojan or some other type of malware, it could actually execute automatically in the background without your knowledge, and actually start doing things, whether it's installs things such as a keyloggers or some sort of virus that infects the machine specifically for a specific gain. So you just got to be very, very, very careful about that. Typically, you can always verify whether it's genuine or not, because you can normally just tell. And if not, you can always validate it if you need to with ourselves, basically. Also look for password protected documents. Any document that requires a login, be very, very careful about it, because there is some people out there that will actually password protect a document. They will send it to you, they'll make it look completely legit, and when you click on to open the file, it will basically go to it will either do it in the actual file itself, or it will actually do it on a website. If it goes to a website, then what it could do is you could put in your email address password. Once they have that, then basically they have full reign of your email account if you don't have adequate security in place. So they could literally, with your email address, they could reset any website password that you use. They could reset, because a majority of websites, when you do a forgot password, it goes to an email address. So they could literally get into quite a lot of your sites and steal your data, or even use your financial details. So be very, very mindful of that. Typically, when someone sends a document internally, though, they will say it's password protected. Here's the password. They won't be asking you for your login credentials unless it's something like 365. But in that case, typically when you were sharing a file on 365, you would be doing it internally anyway, so it shouldn't be asking you for a password. So there's another type of phishing called whaling. Now, this is sometimes referred to as CEO fraud, as it really targets high-level executives or management in the organization, such as CEOs, directors. So the attacker will masquerade them as a trusted source to steal money or confidential information. So they'll basically, they could email the CEO and say that you owe us X amount of money. It needs to be paid to this account by this time, this date and time. And they could make it look like it's been sent from the accounts department. Or it could be the other way around. The director could send this to the accounts department, make it look like it's come from the director, that is, and say that you need to pay this bill to this company. We've done this business for them, pay them. And that happens. I've seen that happen quite a few times, where people have actually gone to initiate the transfer, and then at the last minute, it's been flagged because it's been over a certain amount by, say, the finance director. And they've said, why are you sending money to this company? We don't deal with them. And they've luckily they've managed to stop it. But there has been cases where they've not. And once the money's gone, it's gone. It's going to be difficult to get that money back. So you've just really got to be careful on that front. So how can you identify it? Well, it's basically a normal request. If you get a senior manager or CEO, director that you've never ever made contact with before, just be wary of taking requested actions. I would check that with your own line manager or even the director if you know them personally. Why is this person sending me this? I don't think it's legit. I think it's a phishing attempt. Can you validate it for me? Also, the recipient's email. Since many people use email applications that connect all their email addresses, make sure that the request appears normal, is sent from a work and not a personal address. Now, in a work environment such as CEO fraud, any request would come from a work address. Now, this can be spoofed, so it can actually be used and spoofed. But like you say, it goes back to the first option. It's an abnormal request. If you're getting an email from someone that you've never ever spoken to before, or you didn't even know who they were, you never heard their name, for example, then be very, very mindful and wary of that, and just always double check everything before especially when it comes to money. Always just check and your own data, just to make sure that it is who they say they are, basically. So angular phishing. Now, this is relatively new. And this is quite nasty. So basically, this is where a hacker will use social media as an attack vector to entice a target into divulging personal details or financial details. Now, this is where you get it on, such as the Facebook, you get it on Instagram, and also there's Twitter, etc. I've personally seen it on Facebook and Messenger, where someone will send you a message saying, here's an exclusive offer. We've noticed that you've been browsing for clothing. Here's 20% off. Looks completely legit, and the link looks legit, because generally it's the links that they give you, them shorter URLs, so you think it's genuine when it's not. And you click the link and it'll say, we just need to validate you. Please log in with your Facebook login details or social media logins. And then you basically use them details to sign in. And basically what happens then is they then have your login details for that platform. And generally, these hackers will either have some sort of script that runs on the site you've gone to, and within seconds, they have changed your email address, your phone number, and they have your data. And getting around it is incredibly difficult when you try and raise it with these social media companies, because you then have to prove that's your account. And without, obviously, the account's in someone else's name, it's very difficult to prove it. So you've got to be very, very careful about what you're giving out, because they are after financial gain regardless of what happens, and it's becoming more and more common. More and more people are getting it. You know, this does come down to, it does also come down to things like password issues as well. But it really is something that you need to be very mindful, because it is becoming very, very it's well known. I've had several in the last few weeks. You know, as soon as I get them, I just delete them, or I generally block them and report them usually, and then just delete them. So you've just got to be very, very careful. So how can you identify this type of phishing attempt? Well, notifications. Be very, very wary of notifications that indicate being added to a post, because these can include links that drive the recipient to malicious websites. Now, this is basically where, say, for example, you're following a group on Facebook and you put a comment on it. Usually, what happens is, and I say I've also seen this as well. A few days later, you'll get a notification saying such and somebody's tagged you in on this post, or such and somebody has commented on your last comment. And then you go to it and it will say something like, as an example, hi there, do you want to make money on cryptocurrency? Click here. Or you can make, you can make, £100,000 in like a month or something. And it looks, I mean, to some people, it does look genuine. Most of the time it doesn't, but it does look genuine. You click on that link, put your details in, it's game over. They've got your data, so just very, very careful. This did happen to somebody I know, well, through somebody I know, and basically they did that, and they were offered the debts to be cleared off, and basically it was a complete scam. They ended up losing, they ended up basically going £20,000. Which is now currently going through the legal system, because it was identified as being fraudulent. So be very, very, very careful of that. Abnormal direct messages, similar thing when you get a message on Messenger or Instagram Messenger, something like that, where someone will say, hi there, here's a link, click on it, or have you seen the latest picture from me? And sometimes they'll even make it look like it's come from one of your friends, and that usually means when they've hacked them through a similar attack, they then send the same message to everyone, their friends, and then I've not seen that picture. You click on it, you put your login details in, and that's it. You are literally in trouble then. And just links to websites, don't click on any links in Facebook unless you can completely trust it. Or Twitter or Instagram, just be very, 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 very careful that you're not clicking on any links that don't look right, because once they've got your data, it's very difficult to get that erased. In fact, it's near impossible to get that erased. So another type of phishing is clone phishing. So clone phishing is a technique where hackers clone a previously delivered legitimate email, replacing it with the original attachment with a malicious one. So this is basically where they will send an email, they'll spoof it to make it look like it's a legitimate sender, but it will replace the original attachment, if it has an attachment in the document, with the email, with a malicious one that could be an exploit, a virus, malware, whatever it's designed to do, basically. So how can you identify this? Well, abnormal timings. Be very, very wary of unexpected emails from a service provider, for example, even if that's part of your normal daily job function. So if you get something from a service provider saying, you need to run this file in order to update, in order to update the following, that will be designed. That will be definitely uncommon. That wouldn't happen. That wouldn't happen if they wouldn't ask you to do that. So and also personal information. Look out for emails requesting personal information from your service provider. Typically, they will never ask for bank details. They'll never ask for national insurance numbers. You're in the US, social security numbers, anything like that. They'll never ask for that. They will literally, generally, the emails that you get from your service provider will be it'll have your postcode on it and your account number, and it'll be just information mail. It won't be anything else. Worst case scenario is you can ring them up and say, did you send this message? If not, they'll have some sort of process for reporting phishing mail, basically. So I just wanted to add this section in because it was basically it is an important one. So this is another type of phishing, which is basically called farming. So farming is a bit more of a technical, and it is quite difficult to detect, really. It's where a malicious actor will hijack a domain name service, which is basically DNS is how a domain works with services. So email needs DNS to work, it needs MX records to work, websites need DNS to work, it has A records or CNAME records. So this is basically where a hacker will basically hijack that. And it will basically then, what it could do is it can hijack your DNS and change your IP address. Now that's basically how your website would work. So all websites point to some form of IP address, whether it's an IPv4 address or an IPv6 address. It will point to an IP, and that IP is where your server is located. So it'll be a number, or if it's an IPv6, it'll have letters in it as well. So it will typically be like, 88.151.130.66, for example. And what they basically do is they hijack that, and by basically changing it to another IP address. Now, what they do then is with that they can then redirect your website to basically a website containing a threat or some sort of malicious code or something like that. Now, what this will basically then do is it will hold your kind of site a bit to ransom, really, because they could actually put a ransom page on saying that, if you don't pay us 100 million Bitcoin by this time next week, then, or the next 48 hours, then we're not going to change it, basically. And this also comes into things like email phishing, because you could get a phishing attempt where somebody sends you an email saying you need to update your login details with your service provider, and you change them, and it's actually a hack, and that's so they can get access to your domain to change the DNS. Now, if a hacker gets access to your DNS, they can do significant damage to your business. In some cases, can make you go out of business, because if they change critical DNS such as MX, which is how email works, they could redirect all their email, all your email effectively to them. So that as long as they have the domain on their system and they know what your email address is, they update their MX records to point elsewhere. They could potentially cause an exploit that way. So you really have to be careful about what you're doing with websites that you use, and we're going to be discussing MFA shortly anyway, and that'll come into more light then. But some ways to identify farming is just look out for insecure websites. If your website's going to an unsecure website, then that could be a sign that there's something not quite right, and that would need to be checked. It could be that your certificate's expired, but generally, just check it to make sure that it's definitely nothing that's out of the ordinary. Also, be very, very wary of inconsistencies that indicate a fake website, including things like mismatched colors, misspelling, or strange font. So if you go to your website and there's no SSL certificate, or it's saying it's just HTTP and it's not your website, then your website's potentially been hacked. So you need to be very, very just be careful that by checking that, basically. So we're going to move on to some passwords now, and what passwords, what sort of best practice for passwords, basically. So when you're in a business, you need to be very mindful that your users don't just have to know the passwords to access their work resources, but they've also got their own for their own personal things. So be very, very careful that and mindful that they have to remember a load of them. So you need to just keep that in mind, because obviously, if they've got, say they've got, hundreds of websites and passwords, you've got to be very, very careful that you don't give them too many to remember, because then mistakes are going to basically happen. So you need to give them a way of securing them securely. So basically, the way to do this will be through a password manager. So if they have a password manager, they'd only have to remember one password to get into the manager, and then they can basically manage the passwords for all the sites. Only ever ask them to change passwords if there's an indication or suspicion of an account being compromised. If you're requiring to share say your email address, for example, use delegate tools such as full access, or you can do send as well. You can access the person's mailbox using either that method, full access or delegates. Don't ever give out the password to the mailbox. It's very bad practice for people to know passwords because that's unique to that individual. Also, as well, if there is a critical business requirement that you have to share passwords, because this obviously does come up, you need to have additional controls in place to provide the required oversight. So basically, this could be such as the passwords change daily, for example. That would be, and there is other services that you can get with Azure, for example, that will allow you to have access to certain things for, say, 4 hours, and then then it locks you out. So there is things like that that are available. You've just got to be very, very mindful when you're doing it, and someone's got to keep that password hygiene up to date, because if you give a password to somebody and then basically they leave, they could use that to gain access to your system. So you've got to be very, very, very careful on that front. So some bad practices with passwords basically are: don't use the word password. We see that all the time. You just don't do it. Or a combination of it, such as using an @ and a symbol or a 0, for example. Also avoid using common words such as morning, flowers, friend, etc. Don't use the same password for every account. Never write them down or put them on a post-it note on your laptop or your computer. Don't use patterns like all the ones, ABC 1 2 3, 6 5 4 3 2 1, or typical words like ADF, so basically the keys along the keyboard, or QWERTY. And then try and avoid changing your password regularly, because the proof that people that change password regularly forget them, which leads them to a point where all they're doing when they change them is adding a different character to the end of the password. So, and also as well, if your password is secure, you've done the best. You've basically covered the best thing that you can do for your password. Changing them regularly is just going to make it even a worse situation. And also, this ties into the common one-word passwords, but don't use personal information. Don't use your birth date. Don't use your kids' names, address, pets' names, or anything like that, because all a hacker has to do is, if you've got a social media site that's not basically locked down, that anyone can view, they can get all the data they want. They can do a profile on you within seconds. They can find out, pretty much where you live if you put that on there, or what your kids' names are, when their date of births are, if you published it. And once they have all that data, they can use that to exploit you, and that's what they're doing. This is why, in some ways, social media is great for a lot of things, but in some ways, for security, it's not. But that's just the way of the world, I'm afraid. So some good practices. So the industry really no longer recommends passwords with a combination of capital letters, lowercase letters, numbers, and special characters. The use of multi-word phrases is the best approach, such as monitor, mouse, book, table. That's just an example. So you could theoretically set a password. You could look around your room and say, oh, monitor, keyboard, mouse, bottle, 37, for example. You could have it as that, as an example. Avoid using things like the @ symbol for an A and 3 for an E. Try and aim for 20 to 50 characters. That's the recommended character length. Include weird terms that only you'll understand. So, if it's, you just get some random word that no one knows other than you, that's your best approach. Keep your passwords safe and secure by encrypting them with a password manager, and there is many password managers out there that work. There's ones even built into browsers such as Edge. They work they work relatively well. The passwords are encrypted in there. Make sure each of the accounts has its own set of passwords, as mentioned earlier. Every site you use should have a different password. It should not be the same. You should not be using the same password everywhere. If you're using a password manager, you can actually get them to generate a unique password for that site, and that is unique then to that website that you're going to. And also be aware of some accounts may still require upper, lowercase, special characters, numbers, and may be restricted in length. So there will be some websites out there that have been written in a specific way that you have to have a specific password length, or you have to have certain characters in it. You might not be able to use what you want to use. You may have to put the old conventional way in. So just be mindful of that. So multi-factor authentication, we're going to be discussing that now. What that is. So multi-factor authentication is another method to authenticate you when you sign in to, say, Office 365 as an example, or a website, because some websites use it now. And this provides 2 or more verification methods to gain access to the resource, such as your email or application or online account, whichever you're using. MFA is a core component of strong identity and access management policy. And rather than just asking for a username and password, the beauty of MFA is it requires 1 or more additional verification methods. And what this will basically do is it will decrease the likelihood of successfully cyber attacking you or accessing you, with an exploit, for example, or it effectively it just decreases the likelihood that you're going to get cyber attacked, basically. And we will be discussing Office 365 and Azure MFA options shortly. So how does MFA work? So multi-factor authentication works on a process in which a user will be prompted during the signing process for an additional form of identification. Now, this will either be a code or it'll be a notification, or you can even use biometrics such as fingerprint or facial recognition. So MFA works by requiring, say, two or more of the following authentication methods. So it's basically something you know, which is obviously a password, something you have, which is typically a trusted device that's not easily be duplicated, like a phone or a hardware key, and something you are, which is biometrics. So it's something you have, which is a fingerprint or a face scan, or I mean, in some cases they do have retina scans as well. So these are the verification methods that are available currently on Office 365. So you can use Microsoft Authenticator app, which is probably the number one. Well, it is the number one to use. It's the easiest to use. Once it's set up, it just works flawlessly. Windows Hello for Business is the system in place where certain Windows devices, such as laptops, computers, have a Windows Hello camera, which means it will use facial recognition to sign in. This is obviously the business version of it, so you can use that. And the business version also supports, if your camera doesn't support the facial recognition, you can use a PIN instead. There's FIDO2, which is a hardware key, which is a USB stick, which is created by the FIDO Alliance, and they basically allow you to add an encryption key to the USB stick, and you can only sign in if that's inserted into the machine. So if it's inserted into the machine, it will then, once this is set up on 365, it will then check if the FIDO key is installed. If it's installed and running on the machine, actually you can detect it. You will then pass authentication and you'll sign in. OAuth hardware tokens are basically, some banks still use them. They are like, it's like a keychain basically, and it has a screen on it with a button that you press, and it'll give you like a code, and that'll be what you use to sign in. PayPal used to use them years ago. And there's also OAuth software token, which is any authentication app. So if you don't want to use the Microsoft Authenticator and you say want to use the Google one, or you want to use whichever one that you prefer to use, you can use that method. So that is an option that's available. And there's SMS and voice call. They are now legacy. We strongly recommend not using a voice call, but if you have to, then that's the only option. On 365, voice call is voice call is disabled by default. It has to be manually enabled in AD to turn that on in security settings. So you just need to be very mindful of that. SMS is available. Generally, you'd use SMS for backup, but typically the Authenticator app is the way to go. So how can you enable this? Now, this applies to Office 365 and Azure. So you can enable what's known as security defaults in Azure AD. Now, this is on by default for all new tenants that are created. And what this basically allows you to do is when a user logs in, and they have to do this via the web, they will be prompted to set up MFA. They'll be prompted to set up using the Authenticator app. And it's just a wizard that you go through, and that's it. And you just go through the wizard, you log into the app, it pairs it with your account, and that's basically it. Next time you sign in, you'll get a notification if that's the method that you selected, and it'll say, do you want to approve this sign in? You click approve. It'll either use biometrics or a PIN to authenticate it, and then it signs you in. If you're just using a code, then you just go into the app and you get the code and enter it, and that's how you sign in. So also on this as well, if you're looking for more sort of more control in your organization, if you say we had Azure Premium P1 or P2, you could opt for conditional access policies. Now, conditional access policies take it further, and what these allow you to do is they can say, right, well, I only want this person to sign in if they're on this IP address or in this location or connected to this VPN or this application is running. It's a condition of you signing in, so you can, or I'll only let PC users sign in, for example, and it has to be on this machine. So you can basically set up a condition of what you want that person to do when they sign in, and if that condition is met, they will sign in. It will allow them to sign in basically, and it will require MFA. If you've got it, you can also set it up so if it's met all the criteria, it won't require MFA because it's met that conditional access. So basically, it will then basically sign in. If it doesn't meet it, it will then ask you for MFA, but you can also set conditional access to block it completely. So it means that what you can do both. It does say you can't sign in. So it is a good way from a company perspective, especially if you're on a corporate networks, you can restrict level of access on a conditional based system basically, but that is only available to Azure Premium P1 and P2 customers. And just before we wrap up, just wanted to discuss how to stay secure. This is just a few steps really on some steps that you could take just to keep yourself safe online, basically. So protect your email using a strong and separate password. Cyber criminals can use your email address to access many accounts, leaving you vulnerable to identity theft, which is what I mentioned earlier. So just be very, very careful that all your sites that you use have got different passwords. Use a password manager. You've got the strongest password that you can possibly use, and then at least if one of your sites gets compromised, they can't access the other because the password is different. Make sure that all your updates are up to date. So your OS updates, antivirus updates, they're all the latest versions that are installed. This goes on to the next one. Keep and also application updates. That'll help to protect things because obviously a lot of app updates these days are actually just security updates. They're not feature updates, just like Windows. They have patches that contain critical updates to protect that system against threat. So it is vital that you do updates when they're available. Turn two-factor authentication or MFA on everything that supports it. So websites that support it, there's a lot more websites out there now that do support this. So make sure that is turned on. Two-factor is recommended, or MFA is recommended to help protect all your online accounts. Use password managers. Using a password manager will help you keep your password secure. And finally, back up your data. This is like the number one thing, because if you don't back your data up and you get a ransomware attack, your data is gone. Unless you pay the ransom, and in some cases you pay the ransom, you don't get it. So you've got to be very careful. So safeguarding your most important data. This is things like documents, files, photos, videos, music, by backing them up to an external hard drive or cloud storage. Now we offer a backup service called Acronis Cloud, which will back up 365 accounts, and it will even back up things like OneDrive for business in there. So it is something that if you want to look at a service that will back everything up within 365, Acronis Cloud is the way forward with us. Our sales team will be able to advise you further on that one. So I know it's been a bit of a long one today, so I do appreciate everyone for watching. Thanks very much for today. If you have any questions regarding today's webinar, such as you want to see if what security you've got on your 365 account or Azure account with us, or you want to take out 365 with us, you want to migrate to us, anything like that, that's you want to know like pricings, etc., then please just contact our sales team on 01925 818 448. If you've got any support questions, as mentioned, such as checking your security, what I can get, what other services would you recommend, things like that, support can be contacted on 01925 818 252. Everything, all our products and everything else is on our website at simplymailsolutions.com. You can also get access to the support site on here where you can open tickets. Now, tickets are available 24 hours a day, so you can raise a ticket and one of our support team will come back to you answering any queries or issues that you have. Please make sure you follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We often update these on a regular basis. So for things such as when the next webinar is, new products, migration offers, other offers that we may do. So make sure you follow us on them. And also for all our webinars on our YouTube channel, please go to simplymailsolutions.com/webinars, where you'll be able to view past webinars that we've done, and you'll also be able to fill in the form to be on the next one, to get the link to be on the next one that we do. So it's been a pleasure doing today's webinar. I hope everyone's enjoyed it. I hope everyone's staying safe. Take care, and I will speak to you all soon.